Hi, welcome back. Just on part two of the series with the great man Howard Norsetter. Thanks for making yourself available again, Howie. Had a lot of feedback from the fan base and some new questions come in as well. So everyone appreciates you jumping on. I appreciate you. I hope you're staying warm there in Melbourne. How is it?
It's There was frost on the windscreen the other day. It reminded me of growing up back at home where you had to shovel the snow off the windscreen to get into the car.
Yeah, yeah, that's all right. So we'll jump straight back into it again. I think when we ended last time, we were talking, I believe, about kind of about what's happening in Asia and Europe and America and the amount of games that those guys play. Um, and I guess compared to here, where it's a little bit different. You obviously know those landscapes really well or quite well. And
Yeah,
they're obviously very successful baseball countries as well.
yeah.
Um,
There's a formula that goes into determining if a country is going to develop some prospects that we put together many years ago, and basically works down to the population of athletes who play baseball. You have to have a population of athletes who play baseball. You have to have a climate that allows you to play baseball, and you have to have a structure of games that allow you to play games. And that's basically it. Wherever they play baseball, anywhere in the world, you have a chance of developing prospects. Okay, the more you have of each of those items, the greater the chance of getting prospects. So, for instance, in Australia, we only have 20 some million people, about the size of Canada. Maybe I'm not exactly sure if Canada's got more people or not, or how it compares, but not many people. Taiwan has roughly the same population as Australia. In Australia, we have athletes playing the game, but the majority of athletes are playing Aussie rules for the most part, or rugby, or other sports. So we don't get a lot of the premium athletes, right? But we still get athletes. And, we do have baseball games being played. We do have a structure that allows games to be played, but not games. When I came to Australia back in 1980 to play, 84 to play baseball, the club season was 30 some games, and then playoffs. And it's still that same amount of games. It hasn't changed. The junior there's more opportunities for junior development outside of traditional club ball now than there were. Things like the Travelers, things like other groups that are taking kids and playing games, which is wonderful, which is great. But we've actually reduced the number of games for Australian kids. We do a lot more training now than we ever have, but we don't play games. You have to have facilities to play games, right? And we're doing better with that, but there's still only maybe 3 lit facilities that are, I mean, legitimately lit facilities in Melbourne, and I'm not sure exactly, a couple in Sydney and Brisbane, that have lights that are good enough to run a competition, a high level competition. We haven't done we haven't done a great job in Australia structurally of developing facilities for playing games, and we don't. The number of games have stayed pretty fairly static. So we have the climate that is as good as anybody's anywhere in the world for baseball. We can play baseball year round, but we're almost encouraging kids not to play during the winter. If you have all 3 of those things, if you have climate, if you have a structure, if you have athletic kids playing the game, then you will really develop a lot of prospect high end players. Dominican Republic has much smaller population than Australia. They have a climate that can play year round. They have a structure where kids can play baseball and do play baseball year round, and they have just about every athlete on the island plays baseball. Taiwan similarly has a structure, has a fantastic structure, stadiums, facilities. They can and do play year round. They play during after school in the school system. They're playing every day, and they have a professional league, so they have an outlet for continuing to play baseball. We don't have that here in Australia. We to play those number of games, you'd have to go someplace else, and kids are doing that. there's kids who are going over to the States that are playing in the the showcase stuff because they're not getting enough games here. There's kids that go to the States to play at colleges and universities because there's no option of playing at college and universities here. There's no under 23 leagues here. So if you want to get good, you've got to play the game. You can't just train. And unfortunately now, certainly for the last 10, 15 years, we're training way more than we're playing. We have we have a total investment in training regimes and training programs, but we don't have an opportunity to play more games. And the higher the quality of game you can play, the more advanced players are going to become. In cricket over here, you have all that stuff in spades. And if you're a 12-year-old cricket player, you can play senior cricket. There's no restrictions. There's some bowling restrictions. Maybe it's 4 overs or something like that. But you can play virtually every day, and you're not limited by the number of teams you play on. So, for instance, you could play Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Play games of cricket,
wow,
right? That are with different leagues and different levels and things like that. And if you're really advanced 12, 13, 14-year-old, you're playing senior cricket already at 12, 13, and 14. So it's cricket is the one sport I would say where Australia leads the world and leads the world with a small population. We don't have the population of those other cricket playing countries, yet we kick their butts all the time, and we're developing great cricketers, the greatest in the world. But they have the opportunities to develop because they have the opportunities to play when they're young. They play more than other countries, and if we could somehow come up with a system in baseball that allows us to play more games, and that's not better coaching, just more games, then we will get I think we'll get more players playing it. I think we will get and those players will develop faster. They will be better players. It'll improve at club ball, improve at the high level, high performance, whatever, however you want to describe it. We will have more players playing. And it's a simple equation. You just have to play more, as much as possible, right? That doesn't mean you throw throw the same pitcher every single day, but you play as much as possible. And even in that, saying that with the pitch restrictions, when I came to Australia, there was no real pitch restrictions in the 80s. In the 90s, there started to be pitch restrictions, which were brought in by an American named Darren Garrick, who was in South Australia in Adelaide and ran the development program in Adelaide. And they brought in, essentially Little League pitch restrictions. And it's supposedly to protect arms, worried about kids getting, throwing too much. And it's had the opposite effect. So what happens when you bring in these severe pitch restrictions is kids can't throw enough to develop. And throwing enough to develop doesn't necessarily mean throwing hard. It means being able to throw strikes. So you have to have a certain base of fitness to be able to throw, yes, but being able to throw strikes comes through repetition and comes through practice and comes through games. And we don't throw strikes. We could develop strike throwers even when they're only throwing 70 miles an hour, but we don't. We are not. And in fact, looking at the stats of a lot of our higher end guys, and this is not just in minor league baseball, but you're looking at the results at the national championships, the various national championships, and it's pretty shocking. I mean, our kids cannot throw strikes, and not even close to being able to throw enough strikes to compete at the next level. And that has continued into professional baseball. We have, Taiwan, they play every day. In a baseball, it's a baseball country. It's the number one sport. So they get the best prospects, they get the best athletes, but they also play through the school system, and they practice every day through school system, right? They had I think they recently went to 130 pitch limits for starters in some of their tournaments, 130 pitches, not 60, 80, 90. and they're producing some of the best pitching prospects in the world. They recently beat USA Cup, 2 national championships or 2 world championships ago. Prospects are producing pitchers who throw strikes and can throw curveballs and can compete. Whereas the guys that we're getting now that are, that are pitching in the minor leagues, a lot of times are older guys. They're guys who are converted guys. So you look at, for instance, your boy Wynyard is one of the highest performing prospects out of Australia. He was a shortstop. He was a position player. Bidwa, who's throws exceptionally hard now, has got a live arm. He was a position player, right? They only be pitching full time when they were 18 or 19, right? Even going through some of the other guys that are around, that are it's been kind of a theme over the last 10, 15 years that the best pitchers coming out of Australia were not primarily pitchers; they were position players. So even going back to Liam Hendricks and going back to whoever you want to bring up, they played positions. The Wells boys were position players. Noonborn didn't become a pitcher till later in his career. And I think part of that is because they did not have enough pitches under their belts, enough innings under their belts to be able to compete at the next level. The guys who are position players are throwing all the time. They go to practice and they're throwing. There's no pitch counts when you're taking ground balls, but there's pitch counts when you're in a bullpen, or time restrictions when you're in a bullpen. So the guys who are developing now out of Australia are essentially position players. And we only have one pitcher now that makes the major leagues, and that's O'Loughlin. We are at the point where we have fewer major leaguers, fewer high level minor league players, fewer pure numbers of players in professional baseball than ever before. I'm going back here. I've got I keep track of a bunch of different things. Back in the aughts, the aughts in the 90s, there were years where there were 25 guys signing out of Australia, 25, right? And the average was 15 to 20 every year, going back to 1991 when I started scouting. 1991 when I started scouting, there's 5, 6 guys, but 92 there was 12 guys that signed, and then it just increased all the way through the 90s into the aughts, where some of the years there was 25 guys signing. We had 60 players who signed contracts before 2013 who made it to AA, AAA major leagues. 60 players, right? Since then, we only have a dozen or so. It's not, the numbers have gone way down. So it may be 20. I'll say 20. But if you're trying to put together a national team to compete, and your player base, you've got 60 guys that play AA or higher, right? You can put together a pretty good team, right? If you've only got 20 guys who played AA or higher in the last, this is going back to the last, I'm going to pull it up here, going back to the last 15 years, and some of those guys would have retired already, you're not going to be able to put together a very strong team, right? You're going to have to rely on older players. You're going to have to rely upon college players. You're not going to be able to draw exclusively from the professional ranks. So there's something going on that, there are things in Australia that are roadblocks to developing prospects, to developing players, developing high-end prospects. And for me, we've got the climate, we're getting better facilities, but we don't have the basic structure to play enough games to get better on all levels.
Yeah, well, there's many questions that have come in to do it. I might reword one, but it's pretty much obviously the national program in the youth development through, I don't know, 15 through to 18-year-old kids. They're all on this 80-20 structure or development and that too. And I know that's obviously quite restricting. I know there's a lot of players within that program that want to go and play baseball, want to go challenge themselves overseas, want to throw more. Because playing's fun, as you said, it's not only development, the game situation, it's fun. It's what you join to play. But they're hamstrung. They're not allowed to. You know what I mean? What is this 20 to 80? Is it something that's, around the world in other countries or developing baseball
No,
countries?
oh no, no, not at all. And maybe it came from some kind of study that somebody did, or they're crossing through different sports or something, but seeing what they did in other sports, which is it's good to do research and all that. But no, Australia's. I don't know of any other country that does that. That pulls people out of leagues, out of competition to just train, and thinking that this thought that we have a driveline program that's going to develop velocity. We have these other programs that are going to develop high end skills. There's no evidence that it's worked. In fact, it's quite the opposite. When I was with the Twins, we would we signed a lot of players with the Twins, and they were all pitch protected. They were all pitch limited. They didn't play many games, and they would all break down. There was even position players. They couldn't handle the first week of practice of training and spring training. They'd have sore arms, dead arms by the second week. They couldn't throw. So we had a trainer, Lanning Tucker, that even labeled it. He's called it the underdeveloped Australian arm syndrome. And once we were able to identify what the issue was, then we were able to train Australians differently. And they weren't able to handle the rigors of playing every day, so you'd have to gradually work into things. So there's which puts everybody else a year behind. You're 2 years behind. There's Yoshi Nakamura has run a wonderful program of rubber ball for the last 40 years, I think, where teams come down from Japan, under 12 teams come from Japan, and they play some Australian under 12 teams. My son did that once when he was 10 or 11 or 12. And I first, when I saw these Japanese kids, I was frightened that, my kid was going to get killed because the pitchers threw hard. They threw hard. But then after about 3 pitches, I realized, no, they know exactly where the ball's going. They throw hard, but they know where it's going. They know how to play the game. They play catch. The catchers catch all the balls. They throw down to second. Pitchers throw strikes. Fielders can play. They can really play. I asked one of the coaches how many games they play as in rubber ball. He said, well, it depends on how you do in the tournaments, because the further you go into the tournaments, the more games you play. But his team had played 125 games before they came down to Australia that year. The previous season, they played 125 games at 10 years old, 11 years old. But they could play catch. They knew the game. Their fundamentals were sound. They could play catch, I guess is the number one thing. Our kids couldn't play catch. So to get those 120 games in for one season, when the Japanese have 120 games when they're, say, 12 years old, our kids don't get 120 games in their life until they're 14 or 15. So they're 3 years behind. And they don't, they're not allowed to play real games where you hold guys on, where you throw down to second base. So the catchers are maybe even further behind. And it's our guys who are getting to the major leagues are getting there later in their 20s. It's almost as if they're 2 or 3 years behind everybody else. And if they can stick around long enough, they'll get there. But they're 2 or 3 years behind everybody else.
Yeah, yeah. I found it interesting. Obviously, all the guests that we've had on now, there is obviously concern for, I guess, the way that things are going here in Australia. But as you know, I was over in America during spring training. And I guess it was a bit concerning when catching up with teams over there that they were aware of obviously the Australians and the lack of baseball that we play. And it got me thinking, everyone that signed over the last 3 to 5 years, kind of when I've had my finger a bit more on the pulse. I don't go back as long as you do, but I can't remember a pitcher that signed in the last 4 or 5 years, it's actually hasn't been shut down in their first season. You're talking like Wynyard, obviously Bidway had Tommy John. I know Jackson got injured. He got shut down too.
Right.
I'm trying to think of everyone else. Walmsley got shut down. I think Longstaff did too. They just, can't even do a short rookie season. They don't have the miles in the arms or the development in the arms. And it's kind of like we're saving them here, or with these restrictions that the national program have in the development, all the rest of it is like we're saving them. But then when the kids get over to America to play, they're struggling and can't
Yeah.
get the season.
Yeah. And even more to the point, they can't throw strikes. They don't
Yeah.
throw strikes, right? Their approach, they don't know how to pitch. They don't know how to manage a game, manage a run game. They don't all those things that allow you to become a quality pitcher. They don't have that when they go over. Some of the kids who go to college develop it over there because they get they get the innings. Yeah, I think Sam Street led the nation in complete games a couple years in a row. I think he had 12 or 13 complete games in college where they let him go. The college, there's no pitch restrictions in college. There's no official pitch restrictions. Some colleges throw pitchers more than others. I know that there's a website called Boyd's World where he went and looked at pitcher abuse points he put together. So he looked at the number of pitches, number of innings, the number of pitches that guys threw in college. This is back in the 90s and the aughts, at all the levels, all the NCAA levels, and then put together a pitcher abuse point system based upon did they throw 110, did they throw 130, did they throw more than that, did they throw 9 innings, that sort of thing, trying to cobble together some sort of system. And it turns out that there's a couple shocking things. One, the most abused pitcher in history was in college was Justin Verlander. He threw more than everybody else. He threw more than everybody else in pro ball. He threw more innings than everybody else. He threw more pitches than everybody else. And he's still pitching at whatever age he's pitching at a high level. And he was a little different than others. He didn't go out and throw 100 miles an hour at every pitch. And, he would, in the 7th, 8th innings, a lot of times in the 7th inning was when he threw the hardest. He'd start throwing 92, 93, and then all of a sudden here's a 97, 99 in the 8th, 9th inning or 7th inning, whatever it is, because he knew how to pitch. He had developed as a starting pitcher and had ways of getting through the order 3-4 times, ways of going to other pitches. When you go to, even in professional baseball, when you send a pitcher out, they're only, starters at the lowest level, they're only allowed to throw 40 pitches in an inning, and they won't let guys throw 3 times through the order. Where are you going to be able to develop? Where are you going to get the feel to, if something's not working the first 2 innings, sometimes sometimes it starts to work in the 5th or the 6th inning or the 4th inning. Sometimes that changeup, you get feel for it later in the game. Sometimes you can't throw a fastball for strikes, but you're able to go back to breaking balls, and then through the course of the game, mechanically something sits in correctly, and you're able to throw strikes and go deeper in games. Our pitchers don't have the ability to do that anymore. They're not given the opportunity to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And for me, in an ideal world, at the lowest level, guys would be throwing 130 pitches, 120 pitches, right? And because the competition down there is hitters can't hit, so it's easier to get through lineups down at the bottom level. Nobody cares about win-loss. If you start throwing, if the velocity drops, and this happened with Lachlan Wells with Twins. One time he had, I think he had almost a no-hitter going through 5 or 6, and I think he might have gotten through 5 with a really low pitch count. And I asked Mike Radcliffe at the time, who was our director of player development, he struck out the side in the 5th inning or whatever it was. Great out. And he said, yeah, but he shouldn't have even been out there in the 5th inning because he's only throwing 84 miles an hour. Okay, he was only throwing 84 miles an hour, but he struck out the side. So he figured out a way to compete, only throwing 84 miles an hour, 85 miles an hour, which, if you can figure that out at that at that age, at that level, you carry that out through your career. It's a, it's a learning moment. And that's not happening. You look at the minor league totals of Greg Maddux, Glav, Kershaw, CC Sabathia, Greinke. When they were 18, 19 years old, they were throwing 170 innings. And going back even further, I think Juan Marichal, who threw 270 innings in A-ball. Yeah, I've gone through. I've looked at another one of my passions is looking through stats and doing analysis. And I kind of broke down on continuing to do it too. It's an ongoing process of everybody who threw 300 innings in the major leagues, and now it's going down to 250. And looking at how many innings they threw as teenagers. And it turns out that those guys who threw, who put up 250 innings or more in the major leagues, almost all of them threw over 100 innings as teenagers. And a lot of them threw 150, 160, 170. And that's just, I'm just working off of numbers that I can find through professional ranks, because you can't always find those numbers in college baseball. I've contacted some colleges about some players. And, those guys come in at 18, 19, they're playing fall ball, they play spring ball, then they play summer ball, and they're getting their 120, 130, 140 innings in, right? Doesn't show up during the college season because the college season is shorter. But those other games are year round now. So, the bottom line is it seems to be that the pitchers who threw the most as younger players hold up the longest in professional ranks and have the longest careers and have the best careers, which goes against the grain of thought that people are overworked now. They're throwing too much now. They're pitching too much now. Well, that's not the case. If you look at the numbers historically, that's just not the case. In Joe DiMaggio in 34, or whatever it was, when he was in Pacific Coast League, played 187 games. He played in 187 games, official games. That didn't include playoffs. That didn't include spring training. That didn't include going home and playing summer ball or playing with his brothers in the backyard or whatever. So he would have played over 200 games. That seems like a lot. But then there was in the 1920s, the Pacific Coast League had a official schedule of over 200 games. This is in professional baseball, had a schedule of over 200 games. So how are kids playing more now, throwing more now, playing more games now than they were in the 1920s? They're not. They played over 200 games, and this is in professional baseball, right? I have a good friend, Vern Falwell, that got to AAA with the Tigers, and he went to UCLA. He went to some big time Division I school and got drafted and played winter ball, did all that. When I first started scouting in 1999 or 2000, 1990, whatever it was, a long time. The first instructional league coverage that I had, the instructional league was a 60-game schedule. That's a 60-game schedule on top of the minor league schedule. Now it's down to a couple dozen games. They've really cut back. So Bernie was telling me that he played his 120, 130 games in the minor leagues, and he had the 60-game instructional league. Then he had winter league games. Then he had spring training games. He was playing over 200 games, and that was in the 1920s. That wasn't in the 1920s. That was in the 1980s. I don't know if people from Australia remember Mark Doran playing for Queensland back in the late 80s, a first-round draft pick out of the University of Wisconsin. It came down. He's a big, strong guy. He was a football player. That year, he was with the Angels. And that year, between playing in Australia and playing instructional league and playing spring training, he said, "Yeah, I played 210 games this year."
Wow.
Okay, that was 1980s. We're not going back to the 1920s. That was the 1980s, right? So we are playing fewer games now all over. Where they still play the games is in Taiwan and in Korea and in Japan. That idea of the 100 pitch, nobody is allowed to throw more than 100 pitches. That's a number that was just pulled out of midair. That was somebody thought, the guy who came up with the idea that guys we need pitch counts. 100 seems to be a good round number. Let's not let them throw 100. If they had made that 110 or 115 or 120, we would be seeing 6-inning pitchers, 7-inning pitchers, 8-inning pitchers.
Yeah.
But with all the money that's being spent now on strength and conditioning and the medical side of things and the training and rehab, if you never play the game, you're never going to get hurt. And we're all, it seems to be that we're all, the industry is all about injury prevention instead of to the detriment of skill development. So it's more about prevention than development. Some players are going to get hurt. That always happens. It's always happened throughout history. Guys have blown out their arm. That's always happened. But even with all the medical that we've got now, the supposed great technology and advanced everything, we have more Tommy Johns now than ever before. We're having more injuries than ever before. Well, something's not.
Yeah, definitely. It's like if you don't go outside, you're not going to get hit by a bus. But what sort of life you're going to live if you never go outside? So it's that. But we'll keep moving. We've only got 8 minutes to 8 minutes to go. Just a couple of questions that come in after the last session. One of them, can you ask Howie? It sounded like that he hinted that the data that's collected from the state programs and national programs aren't passed along to scouts. We've been told that scouts get access to all this information as it only benefits them. Is that the case?
No, I don't get information. I've asked many times and I don't get it. And
crazy. Crazy.
Oh. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect me. I have data that I can get. But my eyes work, and sometimes passing on data that is not a good thing for a player because it's bad data. You pass on data to colleges, and I think most of it is going through colleges. You pass on data to colleges, and guys aren't up to scratch. They're inundated with stuff that just goes on that goes in the trash basket. So there's data's great if it's good data, but there's not a lot of great data coming out. There's fewer guys throwing 90 miles an hour now than ever before. It's not debatable. I've got, all the scouts have data going back, 30 years, and we keep records. There was one year where I think we had 20 guys in the country, 25 guys in the country throwing over 90 miles an hour. I think at one tournament, we had 12 or 15 guys that threw over 90 miles an hour. Almost all of them signed, but that's with old technology. That's not with the new fast guns. So anyhow, data always, I don't get it. I've asked for it. I think I'm a bit of persona non grata with Baseball Australia because of some of my thoughts. But no, I don't get it. I don't know. Some people do it. The other scouts I've talked to don't get it. I'm not sure where it goes.
Yeah. Okay. No worries. I'm another question here. I'm a struggling parent. Just wanted to get Howie's opinion. Do you need to be in the Australian squad to go professional or college? As you can imagine, with rising interest rates and groceries, etc., never-ending bills, to be part of an Australian squad, you got to sign up to local baseball, then state baseball, nationals, extra programs, all the rest of it. We just can't afford that, but don't want our kid to miss out on opportunity. Is being part of these squads beneficial for my son's future?
It's. I'm sure it's a great experience. I'm sure kids have a lot of fun. They can say that they represented Australia. But as far as from a development standpoint, I don't know. I would say no. And there have been quite a few players recently who have eschewed the program entirely that have become really good prospects and have gone on to sign professional contracts. They basically have forged their own paths. I know the brothers up in Queensland. There's Going back to Nick Placco-Grego, there's quite a few really good prospects that have not gone even to the national championships. I know that they're so expensive. I wouldn't be able to. If I was growing up, I wouldn't have been able to participate because it is so expensive. Other countries, the other countries I would go to, it's covered at the junior level. They don't pay anywhere near that. Seems like it's only in Australia, South Africa, some of the developing countries that they're having to spend that kind of money that to go to the nationals. But even the local programs, the local academies are expensive. It's tough. It's really tough. It's too bad. It would be great if it was in the schools where you could play. You show up and play at games every day where it's not going to cost you anything. It'd be great if it was like cricket and you could just play with any club, and there were plenty of places to play. It's not going to cost you anything, but it's not. That's just the reality. But to answer, there have been players that have gone on to sign contracts that did not go through those programs.
Yeah, obviously quite a few through here too. Like, yeah, obviously Grego, you mentioned Longstaff, obviously Campbell. I'm just trying to think who else. A whole bunch of them. Obviously, I can't believe his name just evaded me. That picture from Queensland that with Toronto, he was on my trip last year as well, but he didn't do the national programs as well. So there's definitely a lot of other things out there as well. But we've got just under 3 minutes. Howie, did you have any last thoughts or anything else that you'd like to add, mate?
Yeah, it's I'm still bullish on baseball. I love baseball, and I wish there was more opportunities to play in Australia. It would be great if we could play at night. If the focus was on getting lights at club parks, so that guys could play, practice in the winter, so they could play games at night. It would be great if they would drop this age restrictions on kids playing. If you're good enough to play at whatever level, then you'd be able to play at that level. I'm concerned about the future of the Australian Baseball League. I would hope that it's going to continue, but it's a struggle for some of the franchises, and I think a lot of people are losing money. Um, I, I I think we need to go back to the grassroots. I think we need to go back to a club-based system. It would be great to have a club championship, national club championship. It'd be great to have preseason tournaments between clubs that are just run at the club level, without without any kind of overarching national filling national rules or whatever. But we just need to play more games, and we definitely need to get it into the schools. The schools that's where all your athletes are. That's where, if you get a kid in grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, or whatever, and they're a great athlete, they're playing all sorts of sports, but they get exposed to baseball and a decent level of baseball. That's you're not standing around and freezing your butt off in the rain at 7 o'clock in the morning, but you're competing with friends, against friends. Baseball takes care of itself. People fall in love with baseball.
Yeah. All the same. Yeah. 1 minute to go. So, yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we might wrap it up there then. So yeah, Howie Norsetter, appreciate you. Obviously, being a massive part of the landscape here in professional baseball here in Australia, and signed a whole bunch of guys as well. So really appreciate you taking your time and sharing your thoughts to help out the baseball community. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.